And recording. Three, two, one. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to start the podcast out like this. God will not look over you for medals, degrees, or diplomas, but for scars. And this is a quote that is a favorite by today's guest. I thought it was very intriguing, and I decided to share it with you to start off the podcast today. Do you ever wonder how the top elite performers of the world operate on a day-to-day basis? How special ops, Navy SEALs, and special agents think and act? I do, and that's one of the reasons I started this podcast almost 6 years ago. I wanted to get behind the minds of the most interesting people in the world so I could live a better life myself and I could share that knowledge with others. We have a treat on today's show. Our guest is one of the world's elite performers. His name is Errol Doebler. Is that right? Errol
That's
Doebler?
right.
All right, got it. And he has 20 years of combined experience as a Navy SEAL and FBI Special Agent. He served as Assistant Platoon Commander at SEAL Team 4 and Platoon Commander at SEAL Team 1. After his time with the Navy, Errol joined the FBI, where he investigated international terrorist organizations and also served as a member of the FBI's New York SWAT team. Errol was then attached to the U.S. Army's 75th Ranger Regiment while serving as a special agent for the FBI, and he was later deployed to Afghanistan in 2010 with that Ranger Regiment. Errol participated in extensive combat operations and was presented with the FBI's second highest award of valor, the Shield of Bravery, for his actions on the battlefield. Errol left the FBI 13 years later, after 13 years of service to begin his leadership consulting firm, Leader 193, working with Fortune 100 companies, professional sports organizations, tech startups, and executives from around the world. He is the author of The Process, Art, and Science of Leadership, and he's created a leadership process and funnel that we're going to talk about today, along with discussing his background, his mindset, and Operation Mold. Errol, welcome to the podcast today, man. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Chris, and I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Did I do all right on that intro? Is that all accurate?
Almost like you've done this before.
For you, no, but for others, yes,
That's
definitely.
right. That's right. No, it was all spot on. Thanks.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, I'm glad to have you on the show. I love talking to elite performers just because I'm a fan myself and a student as well. And getting behind the mindsets and hearing some of the stories, but then how you are not only articulate, but how you dissect things into processes in order for any type of individual to use that in their life and live a better life. Like, I think it's really, really cool. And let's just start out. Like, where does a guy like you come from, Errol? Where'd you start out in life, and how did you become the guy that you are today?
Yeah, I'm from. I'm a New Yorker,
Okay.
born and bred from Long Island, New York, Bay Shore to be specific. Um, and I was there, like I said, born and bred, and then went on to attend college at the Naval Academy in Maryland.
Hmm.
And then before I was a SEAL, after the Naval Academy, I was what's called the surface warfare officer. I was on a ship
Okay.
for a couple of years, and I don't talk about that part of my career much, not because it wasn't important. It's just it's not what people want to hear about. But being on that ship really weighted a lot into what I do today. But ultimately, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, and so I requested that transfer to the SEAL teams. Got it. Spent time at SEAL Team 4 and SEAL Team 1, and then I wanted to spend my entire career in the SEAL teams, but I got injured on deployment, medically discharged. So I was in the private sector. I just kind of said, this is my fate. It's the way it goes. And I was having a fine time in the private sector until I was on a business meeting in New York City on September 11th, 2001.
Mm.
And like most people that day, especially if you were in the city or lost somebody like we did in our family, changed the trajectory of my life. And I went and got myself medically cleared, joined the FBI. And like like you said in the introduction, I spent the better part of the 13 years doing international terrorism, and I loved that. But I had some frustrations with FBI leadership, and it was just kind of one of those times where I said, well, it's time to put your money where your mouth is. If you're not happy where you are, if the values aren't being met, and you feel like you can add value to people in a leadership perspective, then go do it. And that's what I did. And I met my wife in the FBI, and she left a few years ago now, and we run the business together. And that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. As a young man, a young boy, did you know that you wanted to get into the military? Did you have family in the military, and that's what
Yeah,
inspired
we
you?
we did have family in the military, but we weren't what you would call a military family. Nobody did 20 years. The closest was probably my uncle, and he was a pilot in Vietnam. But my dad served a few years after the Korean War, and I had a couple of uncles as well. But it wasn't ingrained in our processes. It was just something that I came across. My neighbors were military family. And they just had a pamphlet one day of the Naval Academy, and I was just a young kid. And there's a little section on the SEAL teams, and this is now in the 1980s or so. So there's no internet; nobody really knew much about them. And I think that just kind of stuck with me. Like, who are these guys? This sounds pretty cool. So when the time came, all of a sudden the Naval Academy popped into my head. I was a lacrosse player, and Navy has a good lacrosse team, so that was a nice fit. And so that was it. It was nothing really like just driving me to be in the military. It just kind of worked out that way.
You didn't see the Navy SEAL movie with Charlie Sheen
Oh,
and
I
say
did.
that?
I did
Did
indeed.
you?
But that was, I was already in the Naval Academy at that point. It's funny
Okay, yeah.
because I remember when that movie came out,
Uh-huh.
and I got so mad because the competition to get in the SEAL teams is very, very tough, especially out of the Naval Academy. And they don't, at least back when I was there, they didn't offer a lot of billets for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just was like, now all these guys who have a better GPA than me, and they'll step in front of the line, they're going to want to do this because of this stupid movie, which
Yeah.
of course is nonsense because everybody who wants to be a SEAL wanted to be a SEAL, before that. But yeah, no, that I went and saw that movie, and every now and then it finds its way on my TV or computer, and I get a good laugh out of that movie. I just can't. It's one of the things you can't help.
Yeah, especially seeing Charlie Sheen then and now, that's a
Well, that's a whole different conversation.
yeah. As a boy, were you pretty rambunctious and adventurous, or what were you? What were you like?
Yeah, I was. I think rambunctious and adventurous are probably good ways to describe me. I had a lot of energy. I grew up in a family that was a relatively unpredictable environment.
Mm-hmm.
And look, you become your environment, for better or for worse, and a lot of good things. But as far as those two qualities, yeah, I think they kind of lent themselves to some of the challenges that I created for myself, both as a
Mm-hmm.
young man and then as an adult, which I speak a lot about in the book. Let people know this is this whole thing. Everybody can do it, but don't think that people who have maybe a nice resume, that there wasn't just some awfulness along the way, because there probably was,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that was a little bit of me growing up. But look, I was pretty average household, right? We were middle class,
Mm-hmm.
and I make a point to tell people we shouldn't be comparing each other's challenges, right? My challenges were my challenges. They may not have been your challenges, and vice versa, but we certainly had our share of obstacles. But all in all, it was a pretty healthy childhood.
Okay, good. Um, when you started your training, so training to become a SEAL is called BUDS, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you started the training, I think they have a 80% dropout rate or something like that.
Like
Maybe
70, yeah,
70.
closer to
Okay.
70, 70. It varies, but I think it's right around there. Yeah.
What do you think served you well to get through that? Because I've heard of the impossible challenges that go through Hell
Mm.
Week and BUDS training and
Yeah.
all of it. What do you think kept you in during that time?
It was, there's a lot, right? There's a lot that goes into, being physically fit. That goes without saying, right? Everybody there, nobody distinguished themselves physically. Everybody at BUDS um, is pretty impressive physically. But again, we talk about the mindset, your ability to see the good things when there's nothing but bad things to see. But in the end, something like that, something like BUDS, you just can't do it, no matter what your headspace is, what you are physically, if you don't have a burning desire to be a SEAL. That's it. It goes with that. It's just like people who survive in the worst conditions,
Mm-hmm.
right? The people who have just the absolute burning desire to live will generally live. Now, that's not to say that people who die in tough spots didn't have that same desire, but you get my point. So, what got me through it was there's just nothing else in the world I wanted more than to be a Navy SEAL. So the other stuff comes a little more easily, right? The good mindset, being strong emotionally, being strong psychologically, certainly being strong physically, that's a byproduct of that initial desire.
Okay. Was there ever a time during that training where you thought you may quit?
No, there wasn't. And I think that goes with everybody who makes it. I can tell you definitively, every time there was somebody at Bud's training who mentioned quitting or mentioned I'm struggling, they quit 100% of the time. I can't think of anybody who said, I'm not so sure this is for me, or I'm not so sure I can make it, who somehow turned it around and didn't quit. Once they planted that seed in their head, it was over for them. And that's just the way it was. And I saw a lot of that because our class was pretty unique. We started with about 200. And by the end of Hell Week, which is early in the training is 6 months long. Hell Week is, I don't know, like week 4 or 5. We were down to 10. So you want to talk about, I saw it. There was a consistent message for the people who quit, who said, I don't know about this. And then whether it was 2 minutes later or 2 days later, they always quit.
Yeah. I one thing that I really admire about, these teams, these special forces teams, or people that go to battle together, is they form, what is popularly known as like the band of brothers, like this brotherhood, that when you risk your life for somebody to save them and to be there for them, like you form this bond. I wonder if you could kind of explain that a little bit, and then I want to move that into like how we can do this, how normal folks can do this on a regular basis with our businesses and our families.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack even in that very simple statement that you made. And this band of brothers, this notion of band of brothers is accurate. And it's really accurate, though, because it is a shared value. It's a common culture. And look, I speak a lot about culture, but I make sure I just don't use that word and then move on. Culture, in my mind, is the things that we do. It's not the labels that we put on it, okay? And to do things in combat, especially in the SEAL teams, and I went to war with the Ranger Regiment, so I've always been affiliated with and New York SWAT, always been affiliated with what I believe the highest level of combat units. There are certain things that we do, okay, to prepare for battle. Now, it always varies a little bit from unit to unit, and that's fine. But once you have that shared value of the things you do, you hear people talk about cultural fit, okay? Well, you can't have a cultural fit unless you define what that culture is, what those things that we do are.
Right.
And then once everybody's moving in concert with those things and we hold people accountable, there's another overused word, accountability. You can't hold someone accountable if they don't know what they're supposed to be accountable to.
Right.
So those best combat units make it clear. Here's how we do business. And if you don't want to do it that way, that's fine. And we don't mean it in a bad way. You are welcome to leave. Okay, but this is how we do it. And it's very clear. And if you don't do it this way, you'll be left behind. So when you have that kind of clarity around what your culture is, the things you do, okay, and then that people will be held accountable to those things. Okay, hey, Chris, we said we do things this way. Why didn't you do it that way? I've just held you accountable.
Right.
Accountability and consequence are two different things. You may have a good answer, and I can say, "Oh, okay, well that makes perfect sense. Let's carry on." You may have a bad answer. Okay. Eventually, at some point, if you continue to have a bad answer about why you're not doing the things we say we do, okay, that blame starts to fall from your shoulders to my shoulders, the leader's shoulders. Okay. So again, those are the components: establishing what we do, making it clear, doing them consistently, and then holding people to account when they don't do them. When everybody does that, and then of course, combat in and of itself is a rare bird, right? It is the most extreme combat, the ultimate expression of consequence. If you do things wrong or incorrectly, you're going to have either mission failure, injury, or death.
Mm-hmm.
So the need to do things correctly from a leadership perspective get magnified 1,000%, but there's still the same things that any great unit does, right? There's plenty of athletic teams, corporate teams, probably in the arts, right, who have a band of brothers culture, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's because, in my mind, they do those things. So I just kind of went on a long answer to your question.
No, that's great. I really like that. Was there a moment when you realized, and you probably had this before you went into the SEALs, but when you realized that these guys that you were on a team with, that they were more than just friends or team members or even colleagues, that they were like brothers and loved ones? Was there a moment where it really hit you, and then did it change the way you saw them afterwards?
Well, again, yes and no. Think about the people who you, aside from family, right? Aside from saying, who do you love? I love my family, right? It's almost a separate category, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to try to love your family for better or for worse. But think about outside of that. Okay. Think about the people who you've just stay with. Okay. You're just been friends with forever. And that's just a person you care more about than anything else. In the end, you see them that way because, once again, you share those same values. The things you do are the same. That's why people begin to feel that way about each other. So in a place like BUDS or the SEAL teams in general, it's very specific. Here's how we do it. And it's a very high bar. And when you're just with people who do that, you have a natural affinity for them. And then, of course, like we said, if you end up going to combat, right, or even the training for combat brings you that much closer. But now you are exercising those values, exercising the things you do, seeing the results, okay? Mm-hmm. And it does continue to get you closer and closer to people. I have not been as connected to the SEAL community as I wanted to be after I left, and I plan on changing that. But I promise you, I've met SEALs in just my daily life, and you just kind of look at each other like, cool, man, I got you, right? Whether I spend a whole bunch of time with you or not, there's just something where I'm like, I just feel a little better that you're here because I know you.
You're from the same tribe,
yeah. So that's kind of my assessment on that whole thing.
I'm curious. I think, did you spend 7 years in the SEALs? Is that?
I was about 8. Yes, about 7 years in the SEAL teams. Yeah.
What was the difference between your mindset, going on your first mission, so you're a young man going on your first mission, versus the mindset that you had on your very last mission, getting ready to leave?
Yeah, well, it comes with experience, right? Especially as a young SEAL officer, the biggest concern there is you're in charge of a bunch of seasoned warriors, right? You're generally one of the youngest people in the platoon, certainly with the least experience, yet you're in charge. So the ability to
can you explain that a little bit? Like, on your first mission, you were in charge of the other SEALs? So
a SEAL platoon is made up of anywhere between 14 and 16 members. Okay.
Yeah.
And 2 of the members are officers. You're a platoon commander and your assistant platoon commander.
Okay.
And then the rest are your enlisted men. Okay. So if you're not familiar with how the military and that structure works, officers are in charge. They're the leaders. The enlisted men are the people we lead. Okay. But like most things, right, you've got an enlisted man who's been in the SEAL teams for 20 years.
Right.
But because he's enlisted, he still reports to me, even though that I've been in the Navy for 2 years.
Okay.
It's just, that's the way it's set up, right?
Yeah.
You have your designated roles. So as you come in as a young man, as an officer who's in charge of some of these battle-hardened men, who've been in, you go through a lot in your mind.
Yeah.
Will they think I'm worthy? How am I supposed to act? How am I going to gain their respect if I don't know not even half, 90% of what they know? Okay. So your mindset changes in a lot of different ways, but mostly based in confidence. Your enthusiasm is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
But, from the first operation, you go on, you're just like this, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, right? They teach you BUDS training. Nobody really talks about BUDS training in the SEAL teams because it's just a rite of passage. It doesn't mean anything. Okay. It's a requirement. You learn all your stuff, obviously, when you get to your platoon and the advanced training that you go to. But even then, until you actually do operations, you can't possibly know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
So the mindset, there's a lot of different portions to that. The enthusiasm, the desire to do the best you can, the desire to be there for your teammates, to set a good example, that always stayed.
Mm-hmm.
But your ability to see things, right? Make better decisions, right? Kind of command that greater respect, that changes just with time and experience. So there's two very different people going into the first operation and the last operation. The enthusiasm is still there, but then all of the other stuff is just completely different.
Do you feel different as so you said to be able to see things clearly, like I think from the special ops people and a lot of military people that I've met, they mature faster, right? They have to.
Yeah.
I matured very slow. Like I had 20s, I had a really easy 20s, had a lot of fun. But the special ops people that I've met, their maturity is rapid, because you're seeing life and death in the most scary situations on a regular basis, right? So what about the maturity, the Errol on day one of going into the battlefield and the maturity levels on when he was leaving the SEALs?
Yeah. So that's a really interesting point that you bring up. And I would break that into two different areas.
Mm-hmm.
There is the professional maturity, and then there's the personal maturity. And so, yes, I would agree with you that a professional maturity moves faster. Okay. Like you said, the ability to see things, have confidence in making those decisions at a split second based on your first glimpse of what's happening. And now you can see more things because you literally are seeing more because you're slowing down. So from that standpoint, yes. And again, experience does that, right, for you. I mean, I can remember, I remember the first time I was with my new platoon, and we were out at land warfare training, and we were doing what's just called immediate action drills.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a simulation of your squad getting ambushed, and you have to get into a firefight, and how do you maneuver around that? And, so I was just sitting there, like just shooting, blah, 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 right? And then they index like, okay, sir, you just kept your platoon, you kept your platoon there, your squad there the entire time. Everybody's dead. You didn't move once.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but I was shooting. And he was, that's not your job to shoot. Your job is to lead. So all of these little things, right, that happen, then I remember I was like, okay, we did it again. And I'd go to my, one of my leading petty officers, I think we should flank, right? And he looked at me like, well, then flank. And then by that time it was way too late, right? So didn't have the confidence to just say, that's my move and I'm doing it. I can explain it on the after action. Those things come with time, right? So by the end, you're not even thinking. You already know what the moves are to make and the counter moves and so on and so forth. Now, for me personally, though, where I struggled was the personal maturity, right? I allowed, just as we started this discussion, some of that stuff that I grew up with, some of that unpredictability around an unpredictable environment, not being aware of emotions, to lead me to do things that got me in trouble unnecessarily, right? And then by definition, as a leader, you're just not setting that good example. If in your personal life, you're making those bad decisions, whether it's out having beers with the guys or the decisions you're making in your personal relationships, when you're a leader, people will look at you. They'll give you some grace, but they'll also say, okay, that's allowed. Apparently I'm allowed to go make a fool out of myself here, here, and here, and make bad decisions, in spite of the fact that on the battlefield, wow, you make really solid decisions. You're really good. And that was the kind of dichotomy that I went through as a naval officer. How, Errol, can you be so good operationally, but just do some of these things that you do in your personal life. How is that possible? So again, to your question, maturity from the special operations folks, I would say, yeah, from a professional standpoint, there is a what's that? A hockey stick curve, right? It goes up.
Yeah.
Personally, we're still just human beings. We're some folks will be better at it than others. And that was kind of my personal challenge.
I think you talk about this in the book. What was the shifting point for you to make you realize that, you needed to figure out your personal maturity as well as the professional side?
It was after I left the SEAL teams.
Was it?
It was after I left the SEAL teams. So I left. So I didn't get kicked out, right? I got medically discharged. I got injured. I didn't know how, the doctors were like, look, you can stay in if you want, but you're not operating anytime soon. We don't know if these things are going to heal, but you're welcome to stay in, add value in an administrative capacity in any way you can. And there's honor in that.
Right.
Lots of guys do that. Lots of guys had worse injuries than I did and stayed in. Okay. I just felt like it was better for me because I was going through some things personally, right? I was in a terrible marriage. That was feeding into or overlapping with my professional stuff. It was just a mess. And things had gotten so sideways on me. I said, I'm going to go because my reputation now is being hurt based on this personal relationship that I've gotten myself into. And, the long ride home from California back to New York, there's a lot of time to reflect on those. And, while it wasn't my fault necessarily that I was leaving, I thought to myself, but I'm not leaving like I want to leave, right? I'm leaving with a lot of asterisks. And why? Why would I why would I make those decisions? And now I am no longer this thing that I wanted to be. And I just can't have it this way anymore. And that was the beginning, right? It was, and for anybody listening now, so I was, I don't know, what was I, 32 when I left the SEAL teams, right?
Okay.
Old as far as, SEAL operators go, right? It's kind of like professional sports, but, still a relative baby in life. And, it was still, that's where I kind of started to develop this process, right, of leadership. As I looked back and I said, what were the things that I did initially? What were the adjustments that I tried to make without really having a full knowledge that I was making these adjustments, right? And I was like, a process. It's a process. And it took a long time. And that, for me to get to a more stable place as a human being. And even now, the more you know, the more you realize how much further you have to go. But what I did see was these changes are process oriented. They have to be, right? Because I have to know what I'm doing and where I'm doing it for me to go back and say, how did this result get bad? Oh, I didn't do this thing as part of the process. That's where I missed it. So yeah, that was, that's kind of the story of this transformation, this personal transformation. And it was tough. It was tough to swallow, but in the end, I think it served me very well.
I want to talk about your FBI career here in a second, but just a couple more things about your time with the SEALs. How many missions did you do over those 8 years? Do you know?
So now remember, I was in the SEAL teams in the 90s. So name the war in the 90s. There wasn't one. Right. So 90 SEALs were ready to go to war at all times.
But not doing so much. Yeah.
But not doing so much. So oddly enough, the operation or the rehearsal that I got injured on was a rehearsal for an operation. We were going to do a ship shakedown. But me and all the people who were in the teams during that time period, we didn't really see, a whole lot of combat. Now, the ironic part is when I went to Afghanistan as a special agent with the FBI, attached to the Ranger Regiment, I'm not even sure how many operations we went on. I was there for 4 months, and I think, we averaged an operation every other day, every third day or something like that. So certainly the combat, that I didn't see necessarily as a SEAL got made up.
Made up then.
It got made up later. Yeah.
So the 90s were a bad economy for SEAls, right? For
terrible. Yeah. Right. And then it went the opposite way as it's meant to do. Yeah. But yeah, there was very few, I got into the Navy after the first Gulf War was over, in 91. And what that last, like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So you had some guys who saw some action there, okay, and that they were valuable. But a lot of the guys where we were getting our practical experience were still Vietnam SEALs. They were still a bunch of guys who were in the teams in Vietnam, and they were still around. So,
Oh wow. Oh
yeah.
wow. Yeah. Okay, so you take how long was your break between SEALs and the FBI? Was that a few years?
It's about 4 years.
4 years.
About
Okay.
3 or 4 years, something like that.
And then you decided to go. What made you decide to go into the FBI?
So after 9/11, I applied to all the usual suspects, right? I applied to the FBI, the CIA, and whoever the heck else was out there. And the FBI just they were the most aggressive in, putting the application through and things like that. So I was just like, I'll go with them. And, knowing that they had a great mission, and that I could then actually get into the fight that I wanted to, which was counterterrorism. So it wasn't that tough of a decision. The CIA, I think, would have been great. Just the FBI was moving faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so one thing that I found unique, you said this, I believe you said it in your book. You said that good leadership was the norm for the SEALs team, but the opposite was true for the FBI. I'm curious why you think that is?
It's hard to say, and I get asked that question a lot, and I expect to get asked a lot because I said it, right? And it stands out. And I'll make the caveat, I'll make it every time. Some of the best leaders I ever met were in the FBI. So it's not to say that there are no exceptional leaders in the FBI. There are. As a matter of fact, it's a few of those great leaders who do the great things that the FBI does, right? And that said, those guys and girls are outliers. They just are. When you get a good leader in the FBI that you're working for, you're like, thank God. And really, and great stuff can happen with a great leader because you have a lot of autonomy in the FBI to create the work that you create. Whereas at the opposite in the military, right? You're told you're going on this operation. You don't get to pick your operations. But why then is it like that? I think that I just still can't come up with a good answer. When we say a culture of leadership, it's the things you do and not the labels you put on it. I feel like the FBI labels leadership as something and doesn't do the things that they're supposed to. There's too many bad leaders in place that aren't being held accountable to their behavior. Okay. I think we're promoting people, and I think they started to change this since I left. They promote people way too early. Okay. They say, oh, there's an opening. Oh, you've only had 2 years in. Yeah, you can be in charge. I think that's wrong. I think giving people the option to opt out of leadership positions, even though they are uniquely qualified, that's something that I would change, right? Because people love working cases, but no, you're a great case agent. People respect you. You help everybody. I'm sorry if you don't want this, but you're in charge here because we need you in charge here. I think there needs to be more of that, putting the right people in the right seats. So there's a lot of things that I could point to, but I think they've got a long way to go towards accountability, making it clear what leaders do, what the standards are for FBI special agents, and then holding them to that. That's the best answer I've got.
My assumption is, from an outsider, and I could be completely wrong, is that it seems like an organization like the FBI might be more political and connected with network and status. So if you know the right person at FBI, maybe you can move up faster, or you come from the right type of, I don't know, that could be wrong. Whereas the SEALs, it's like you have to operate at X, Y, and Z. If not, people die, and there's more like you said, accountability there, and thus better leadership. Is that?
Yeah. Well, so I would, yes and no. I don't think, as a blanket statement, I don't think that would be accurate, right? Because that still exists everywhere, right? Two people being of equal stature, and the one person knows a couple people, they're probably going to get the nod, right? And that's just life. So it never struck me as something that was endemic in that culture. And look, I use the word combat, not in a loose term, but I say, look, there's many forms of combat in my mind. Okay. And if you don't do things right in combat, right, all the consequences I said, mission failure, injury, or death. And in my mind, as an FBI special agent, if you're going into a rough neighborhood, okay, and people are going to recognize who you are, and I go knocking on doors and I'm not prepared, I consider that combat, because if you do things wrong in that situation, mission failure, injury, or death.
Right.
So there's a lot of places for combat in the FBI. Okay. Now, I think that there's a lot of risk aversion in the FBI. I would say, now as we talk about this is starting to come a little clearer to me, because I haven't talked about it in a while. I think that's a problem. Oh, if this goes wrong, or I try this, not even somebody's going to get hurt. Like it may not work and I'll look bad. So we're not going to do it. There's a lot of that, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
I was a pretty aggressive special agent, and I got myself into a lot of, high risk situations for the people that I investigated, which is good, right? Those are the people we should be investigating. They're dangerous. And, I had done an undercover operation. I wasn't the undercover. I ran the operation, and the undercover and I were very close to each other. And we would talk a lot about the situations he was being put in.
Yeah.
And we would go through the process. Okay, what will we do if this happens? What will we do if that happens? And most importantly, undercover, are you good with this? Because if you're not, it's not happening.
Right.
Okay. And by and large, he was good, mostly because we really went through the processes. What can go wrong? Can we mitigate everything that can go wrong to make it okay for you? And I remember, I got into a heated argument with, one of the leaders who said, no, we're not going to do this because you're going to get somebody killed. And I said, I resent that statement, because here's all the things I just explained to you, how we're going to mitigate all the danger. And then I finally said it. And I said, oh, by the way, this is what people pay us for, to put our lives at risk for the greater good of the community, for the greater good of the country, for the greater good of the safety of our citizens. That's what we're paid for.
Right.
Okay, we're not paid to go in blindly and get ourselves killed because we didn't plan properly. That's not what we're paid for. But we're paid to mitigate as much risk as we can to our people, and then put ourselves out there for the greater good. And the fact that statement got looked at like I was some careless rebel, that's when I knew I'm not in the right spot. I'm just simply not in the right spot. How can we all not reset ourselves after I said that?
Right.
How is that not? That's what we do. We are law enforcement officers.
Right.
We put ourselves at risk.
Right.
You would never hear something like that in the SEAL teams. What you would hear is, we can lose people here. Have we done everything to mitigate the risk? Let's go through the plan. Let's pick it apart at every single level. And then let's look at the accepted risk that's left.
Yeah.
That's the way it's done. And so that was, again, as we talk about going back to your question about why is that leadership like that, those are just some examples. Now the great leaders, they got it.
Yeah.
They would say, this is a great plan. I like the target. It's bold. Let's go through how are we making sure the undercover is going to be okay.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't answer their questions and they said, you're not ready to go. Well, I can live with that as an aggressive person, right? I can live with it. Like, you asked me a bunch of questions that I didn't have the answers to. I need to get the answers. That's fair. I can live with that, but let's not even ask the questions, and then let's not assume the risk. That was a problem for me.
How far along in your FBI career did that happen?
It was towards the end. It was towards and again, it happened enough, but it's not until it starts to happen so much, right? Anybody who's just had enough of whatever it is, they don't have enough after the first instance of something that they don't like,
Yeah.
right? You kind of look at it and say, did I do something here? Or is this a one-off? And then the more you see it, you say, okay, this is kind of the way things are done.
Yeah.
And that's where I was. So when it happened that time, I just had enough. I said, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And that was it. And again, let me caveat, I loved the job of a special agent. I loved it. I loved every part of it. It was that stuff that I just couldn't deal with anymore.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your, and I don't know if you can or not, but your scariest moment between either your time with the SEALs, the FBI, or the Rangers?
Yeah, you know, the injury that I got, you know, medically discharged on, you know, I fell 30 feet from one moving boat to another moving boat. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was scary in that's what happened.
Right.
And there was a lot of things going on, or I thought I was going to fall in between the two boats. And one of the boats, you know, was a massive tanker. And if that happens, you just get sucked right into the propellers and you become fish food. So that knowledge initially, you know, was bothersome. But it's funny. A funny thing about that story is, you know, I was so sure that I was going to die that there was kind of a calm that also came over me. So it wasn't that fear that holds you. It's just like, oh, wow, this is bad, man. I can't even believe this is it. Uh-huh. And so it's a different kind of feeling.
Did that hit you as you were falling, or
as soon as that ladder broke and I went down, there was just, your mind moves fast. It's everything they say is kind of true. Things slow down.
Okay.
The number of things that I thought about on the way down was uncanny. For, you know, what, you fall 30 feet, what is it? 10 feet per second, you know, whatever the rate long is that you fall, it's not that long. And again, the number of things I thought about was crazy. And so, you know, maybe from a standpoint of, did that really scare me? Maybe that's the wrong answer. The things that scare you are the things where you have time to think about them and, you know, and react. And it's just not happening so fast. And then you get to think of all the other consequences. So I do remember in Afghanistan, we were going to go on we were going to fast rope onto a target. Mm-hmm. And I do remember thinking to myself, why does the prospect of fast roping onto this target scare me so much?
So what is fast roping exactly?
Fast roping is when you're in a helicopter, they throw a rope out of the helicopter, and you hang on with your hands and you slide down, right? Okay. You got a bunch of guys people on the rope. And, you know, because look, I knew why it was scary. It was, the terrain was awful, right? And like the idea of doing it on that terrain, the reason you fast rope into an area like that is because the enemy's all around there. So you are sitting duck as you're sitting on the rope. Oh, wow. So I guess if I had to, at first glance, think of, was there something that scared me? The knowledge that was the plan, and we had several hours to chew on it, right? So you just got to sit there and think about all the things that can go wrong. Right. And I was looking around, and I do remember I went to one guy, and everybody had kind of a feel about it. And I just did, you know, one of the guys I was close with, I said, man, for some reason, this is scaring the shit out of me. He goes, you too? And I said, yeah. Now, that said, everybody was on, right? The plan was a good plan. We ended up not doing it, the fast rope portion of it. And maybe it's because, you know, who knows? Maybe because everybody
scared too many guys.
Yeah, scared too many. And the guy who was in charge of the overall charge was like, even I don't feel good about this, and I'm not. So, you know, there's a little bit of that. But yeah, I would say, you know, off the top of my head, I do remember that actually putting my heart in my throat for a little while. But, you know, I was still going to do it. You know, there was never a question of, well, I'm not doing it.
Right. Were you fast roping into like a surrounded area that all the enemies were basically surrounded?
Well, it was the reason you go in, the reason you would have to do something like that is because you want to be on target quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. and you want to be on target quickly to get the element of surprise. So normally we would patrol in, we would walk in to hours, right? And we would so we would land really, really far away, safe, and then we would patrol into the areas, then kind of surround it and then hit it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's not an option, right? You just won't get the element of surprise for whatever reason with that walk in. So then you need to just you need to have a dynamic entry.
Right.
And if it's in a place where the helicopter can't land because of the terrain is such, and you throw the fast rope out, and that's the next fastest way. So that's why you would do it that way. You need that dynamic entry to gain the element of surprise because it's the only way to do it.
I want to ask about gut feelings, because it sounds like that may be an instance where you have gut feelings. I've watched the movie Lone Survivor and read the book as well, and they said all the guys that went in on that mission, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but all of them had a bad gut feeling about it, a bad intuition, So how much does that play a role in like how you operate in what you decide to do? Maybe not just in when you're in the special forces and FBI, but also in business and life.
Yeah. Gut feeling is important. And people call it intuition, right? I've got I've got a bad feeling, a bad gut. You've got to pay attention to that stuff. You just do. Now I can't speak specifically. Look, I read Lone Survivor, saw the movie as well. I know the story, and they're heroes. Mm-hmm. Now, if I had to speculate, and God forbid anybody, I'm off base, and anybody listening to this is Errol's criticizing the guys from Lone Survivor. I'm not. Okay. But it was early, right? That was early, right? And like I told you, in the 90s, there's not a lot of combat experience going around, right? Yeah. So those early operations for everybody, the whole military, not just the SEAL teams, it was all kind of a new thing, right? If you look at it, those guys didn't have helmets on, right? I don't even think maybe they had body armor. I can't remember. But in the 90s, you didn't patrol with body armor and helmets. You had your floppy cap. And if you had body armor, it's like, no, that's too heavy, right? We have to be fast. Okay. And then they realized we can still be fast, but we need to save some lives. We all need to be wearing body armor. It evolved. Yeah. So if there was maybe a bad feeling about that operation, it just may have simply been from the fact that there was not enough experience to build on. Okay. Right? To feel good about it. Okay. That operation was probably done a gazillion times after that. Yeah. But with experience, with people now remembering, okay, now this is combat. I got it. And now we're learning lessons and things like that. A lot of that stuff was theoretical, right? No final consequence. And again, ultimate expression of consequence. So if I had to guess, if it's true that they said they all had a bad feeling about the op, knowing SEALs, knowing the mindset, and having had bad feelings before, it was probably due to the fact that we've not seen this enough to feel good about it. Okay. If I had to guess. Now that said, that goes to process, right? Process is process. If we're not feeling good about something and we can't point back why we don't feel good about it, there's a problem. Okay. That intuition needs to be processed. I guarantee you those guys did everything they could from a planning and training standpoint to be as prepared for that operation as they could. That I can tell you without having talked to any of them. I just know that for a fact because that's the way SEALs operate. Right. But again, there's just some things that they weren't sure of, they hadn't seen. And that might have been what led to the uneasy feeling going in. Yeah.
How do you so when you get a bad gut feeling or want to use your intuition, say in your business, like building your business or working with your family in your personal life, what are some signs for you that says, oh, this is something I shouldn't do, or, oh, I know this is something I should do?
So, again, putting your intuition to process it sounds weird. Okay. But here's what I mean by that from a business standpoint. I feel like I know how things should be done. I feel like I know why I make the decisions I make. But I can't hold people accountable to my intuition, right?
Right.
They should know that that's what I'm thinking. No, they shouldn't know that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Right? And I can't teach people my intuition. Let's just say I'm really good at what I'm doing. Well, it's my job as a leader to train as well, right? And get everybody on the same page. So that's what my process does that I have in the book, The Process, Art, and Science of Leadership. I believe that the elements I put forward are present for every situation you will ever face.
Okay.
And if you go through and you say, how am I feeling? Recognize gut feeling, right? How am I acting? Is it the way I want to be acting? I'm now conscious of my culture. And have I established the behaviors that I want for myself, for my culture? So those two competing things. What do you do naturally? And then wait a second, what do I want to do? Okay. And then what is my plan in the big scale and in the micro scale to get this thing going forward the way I want it? You need those elements in everything. If you look at any situation you're in and the result is bad, I can tell you, you can either look at you were unaware of your emotions and how you were acting on your emotions, and therefore you had some random action or random result. Okay. You didn't establish how you want to be behaving, or right. We act, how do we do in moments of stress? We make sure that we keep our voice low, that we're calm, that we look at the things that are happening and we prioritize them properly, right? We are generally methodical about our action. Right? Whatever the behaviors you have, we are patient in how we listen to each other. Whatever you've established, okay, that's fine. It'll be specific to your environment and what you need as a team or an individual. Or you didn't plan properly, right? Maybe you had all those first couple elements, but then you just acted without hitting all the elements of the planning process. Right. I just think it's foolproof, because now every time I coach people or teams and something goes awry, so let's go through the process. What'd you miss? They always miss something. Always. Right. So now what I'll tell people is that's now your intuition. You've just learned how to articulate your gut feeling and your intuition. And now you can teach it, because it's going to be a little different for everybody, right? What they're afraid of, how they react to certain things. But if we go through a process, at the end result, we can see where things went right and where things went wrong. And then we get to make targeted adjustments. So that's my thoughts on intuition and gut feeling.
Can we talk about the steps in those process? I think you have like 5 leadership steps, and then the SMAC, which is the system, right? Of
the planning process.
Yeah.
So look, the elements of the leadership process, what I just described, and everybody listening, you just think to yourself, when does this not apply? If you walked into a room to have a conversation with your child or your significant other, or your boss or your colleague, or you're ready to go out to combat, the same elements apply. Okay. And process means they go in order. Okay, it's a process. Emotional awareness and recognition. That's it. Emotions drive our actions. And if you are unaware of your emotions, then you are unaware of your actions, and then you are getting random results. First, that is the base layer of this whole thing. If emotions drive our actions, which they do, actions, the things we do, make up our culture. So when I say cultural awareness and recognition, right? Awareness and recognition around the first 2 elements. We have to see what it is, for better or for worse. Okay. I get insecure. That is my emotion. And when I'm insecure, I withdraw and do diarrhea of the mouth. I have to be aware of that. Okay. And I have to not judge it. So now that I've seen that, now I say, okay, now that I've observed these things about myself, what I do, my culture, based on how I feel, my emotions, how do I want to behave? What are the behavioral changes that I want to make? Guidelines for behavior. There'll be a couple based on what you've seen, okay? And we can all agree, this is why this process is for everything, everywhere. Because we can all agree that we need to be aware of emotions, right? Based on what I've just said, makes sense.
Right.
But Chris, your emotions are going to be different than my emotions. And your personal culture based on those are going to be different from mine. Yeah. And the behaviors that you decide you need to really implement in your life to get better, to make targeted change, are going to be different than mine. But let's all agree we have to go through those things to make the targeted change. And in the end, leaders drive mission accomplishment, right? So to drive mission accomplishment, we need planning. And I just took the planning process from the SEAL teams, right? The acronym is SMACC, SMACCC, right? Watered it down, modified it, made it very easy to understand and applicable. If you're wanting to accomplish something, follow these elements, okay? And you're going to be in good shape. You just are. It's born of blood, literally. And then the last element is the resistance. Why do I say that? Process, art, and science. Well, I just talked about the process. Those are the elements. The art is inside each one of those elements. It's all going to be different for the individual, but we have to follow that element of the process. The science is this, and this was an add-on to the book. I just happened to be studying how the brain works for behavioral change when I was writing the book. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh my God. I'm like, my process follows the process the brain goes through to rewire itself.
Yeah.
Literally, when we as human beings acknowledge our emotions, right? I'm doing this thing and I do it over and over and over again. I don't even realize it's in my subconscious. And now we realize it's based in an emotion that we didn't acknowledge perhaps. The brain science tells us the brain automatically starts to send new chemicals to the body. Yeah. We're physiologically changing ourselves. And then when we recognize how we're behaving, that's more recognition. The brain starts to change itself more. Then we decide how we want to behave. The brain changes even more, rewires itself even stronger. And then we make a plan and execute it. The brain rewires itself. That's how it works. Now I say the resistance is the final part because what I tell people is, now that you know, if you follow this process, you are literally rewiring your brain, mm-hmm. Okay? And you fall off track from an individual level, right? You get to give yourself a little grace, a little patience, not an excuse, but say, I'm trying to change my physical and chemical makeup of my body. This is hard, okay? I'm not doing it right away because I suck or because I don't care or because I'm stupid. It's none of that.
Yeah.
You're doing something really hard. Okay. And you get to say, all right, it's hard. Let me reset here. Same thing for a team. If you present this to your team, which I recommend everybody does, you're trying to change the behavior of a group.
Yeah.
Okay. So when they don't necessarily come to you with their plan, when you ask them to, you can think to yourself, all right, this is new. I don't have to, Chris, you're fired. You one more thing like this. I can look at it from a different perspective.
Right.
Right. On why somebody didn't do something that I asked initially. So yeah, that's the process, the art and the science. There it is.
So part of the culture, your training is having companies put this into their businesses, into their business model. So people, and I've seen this many times, like we have masterminds, I've coached people for a couple years. I see a business when there's no systems and processes, right? And mm-hmm. It's just kind of fly by your pants. The leader may be an awesome entrepreneur, but struggle with communication with the team or mm-hmm. Knowing the boundaries. So like as a SEAL, as an FBI agent, you've come up with this process that this is the boundaries, the guidelines that people have when they have businesses. And when there's something that's out of whack, you can say, oh, did we forget this piece of, right?
That's right.
And you said, okay,
absolutely.
let's go back to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, what I do is, I never really throw a cliche statement out there and let it sit. I mm-hmm. define it all the time because I think that's important today, mm-hmm. right? So when I say I empower people and leaders, better human beings, to become the best version of yourself, mm-hmm. here's how. Because I provide you with a process that is going to let you decide the things that you need to do to get better as an individual or as a team. My process allows you to make the decisions. I don't come with you with the 5 great things leaders do.
Right.
We can all do that. They're never wrong. I've never read a leadership book and they outline 5 things that leaders do and said, that's bullshit. That's not right. They're all right. Uh-huh. The problem with relying on those types of things is it may not be in context. It may not be specific to what you need as an individual. Mm-hmm. You may need something very special and unique, and you're only going to get that and recognize it through this process, emotional awareness, right? Now I have empowered you to make the proper adjustment because it's yours. So that's what I love about my process in coaching people. I never tell anybody what to do.
Right.
I just ask them, where are you in the process?
Right.
Where are we? Oh, you haven't identified your behavioral guidelines, well, that's why it's going awry, because everybody's just acting however they want. Right? If you want something, you have to define it, make it predictable, right? And then we're off to the races. Now we can make some more adjustments along the way. So that's how my system, my process, as best as I can determine, is a little unique and different.
Yeah, I like that. I like the system you've set up, because working with all the businesses and entrepreneurs I've worked with before, I see it's a need, because people will just start up a business and within 5 years, 3 years or so, they have something really good going, but they don't have that leadership training and systems down to handle that team growth and communication. One thing that I do want to chat about is you're I think you're a Wim Hof trainer, right? Certified trainer.
Yep.
I'm an ice bather. We have an ice bath in our backyard here.
Well done.
Yeah, been doing it for years. Love it, man. And you talk about in the book too why you use cold therapy and why you use that with your clients as well, but also with controlling the emotions and then the rewiring of the brain. So could you explain that process a bit for us? So
I sure can.
Understand?
Yeah. So look, the process that I just outlined, right, makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. The question is, let's just start with the first one, emotional awareness and recognition, right? How do you practice that? Right? We have lives. We have things we need to do. We get caught up in the minutia, right? Practicing that basic element of human recognition, I don't even know what the term is, takes practice. Mm-hmm. How do you practice emotional awareness and recognition with zero consequence, right? How do you practice cultural awareness and recognition with zero consequence? How do you decide which behavior you want, right? Well, there's one thing. If you are standing in front of an ice bath, okay, and your intention is to recognize your emotions, guess what? You are not going to have to search for them. They will be right in your face, okay? Right. It's just cold. It just amplifies everything you do. You can't hide from it, right? I'm a meditator, right? I'm a breather. I'm all that stuff. I believe in it to the nth degree, okay? But I can tell you this, if we're all going to be honest with each other, some of my meditative and breathing sessions are better than the others. Of course. Right? Sometimes I just can't get the focus. Sometimes I'm still thinking about my to-do list. Sometimes even if my intention is to understand emotion or create an emotion in my body, right? We call that manifestation. Sometimes it's just not happening.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist that way in an ice bath. Right? If your intention is to do that, you can't hide from it. You will just either decide consciously not to do it and get out, fine, conscious decisions, right? But you're not going to go back and go, gosh, sometimes this just isn't working for me.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of the cold. Take that in any one of my elements, right? You want to establish what you do, right? It's a very hard question to ask. What do I do? We do a lot of things. Right? Do I draw conclusions about what I do? Again, but pay attention before you get into an ice bath, in the ice bath, afterwards, what do you do? Are you walking around? Let's just say it's cold shower, right? It's just called cold exposure, right? Are you walking around in circles, figuring out something else to do before you, just anything besides getting in? Oh, I think I need to look at my fingernails. I haven't really clipped those in a while, right? Right, whatever. Right. When you get in, what are you doing? Are you making a big show of it? Oh, F this, F that, rah, clenching, right? What are you doing? When you get out, what are you doing? Are you, again, still continuing to make a big show? Are you weeping? That was the worst thing ever. Do you have to call everybody and brag about what you did? Right? Whatever it is, without judgment. But if you're looking to establish these things and understand and make them a habit, the ice bath is the only way to go, right? And you're also going to find that some of the things you do under stress, because that's what cold exposure is, you're putting yourself under stress. Some of the things you do will mirror very closely and disturbingly the things you do in your day-to-day under stressful situations, right? And, so again, now we get to decide, how do we want to behave in this thing, right? I want to be calm. I want to have my breath. I don't want to make a big show of it. Now we've got a behavior to work on. Yeah. Right? Without consequence. Practice it in the ice bath. Practice it in the cold, in the cold shower. And again, the plan, the whole thing, it all works. So that's why I use it. and I'll be honest with you, not everybody will do it, right? Most of my stuff, well, I was doing remote. I like to say this. I was doing remote before remote was cool. Right? You can't, if you have clients, you can't just be in person with everybody, right? So we set up the whole remote thing in the video series, and I don't have control over people, right? I'll say at our weekly call, based on what I've asked you to do, had the shower go. Yeah, I didn't do that. All right. What can I do? I can't do anything, right? All I can say is, well, here's why we're doing it. It's not a macho drill. It's certainly not an ego drill. It's a drill to work the thing. Yeah. So, the people who do it, they get a lot out of it. The people who don't, and they can't figure out things that are wrong with them, I say, well, look, maybe we'll start with, you refuse to do the cold exposure. Yeah. Maybe that's a place for us to start. Let's look at why we were refusing to do something like that. Right now we can, it's a no lose proposition. So that's kind of, again, the long explanation of how I employ the Wim Hof method to my leadership process.
That's great. You did 100, or you did an ice bath every day for a year. Is that right?
So yeah, I'm about, probably 80% through done on that.
Okay. Yeah.
And, I wasn't sure what I wanted at, right? I think if you've read, I've got a blog, right? I blog a lot. And I've got a specific blog, 365 at 36.5, that just chronicles this little journey. And I started it because on my son's birthday in April of 2020, because, COVID had just started, and we were having his birthday party in our driveway with his grandparents. And it infuriated me. And I can say, I'm past kind of caring. The whole response to COVID infuriates me. Okay. Because, people claim follow the science. Well, my question is, what science are you talking about?
There's a lot of science out there.
There's a lot of science, but if we're talking about the science that actually keeps people healthy, that when an unknown or a new virus enters the body and the body just responds appropriately, are we talking about that science? Okay. Because we're not. Because if we were, we'd be having a completely different conversation about how unhealthy America is. Right. Right. Everybody wants to say CDC is the final authority. Well, good. Let's use a stat. CDC says that 96% of the people who've been killed from COVID, quote unquote COVID, had on average 2.6 comorbidities. That means that they had 2.6 things wrong with them from a lifestyle perspective that might end up killing them anyway. Right. Right. So that leaves 4% of deaths due to a virus. Right. That is not a pandemic. Right. Okay. That's just not. Okay. So I was frustrated. I was frustrated that my son had to go through that. I was frustrated that we were having what I felt the wrong conversation. We need to be having a health conversation. I was frustrated that they were locking everything down and not letting people. My frustration was to the nth degree. Okay. And I said, I got to get this under control. This is no good. And I said, well, obviously breathing and ice baths, but I need to up the game. I just need to up it. And I said, every day. And I've got to track how this is working. I've got to be able to tell people, here's where I was, here's what I did, here's where I am now. And I was very detailed initially on things, as far as mood and what I was doing, and, maybe some biometrics as well, not quite as much. But then I said, stop with that. How do you feel? How are you acting? Yeah. What's your environment that you're creating as the leader of your family, as the father, right? And with the intention every day of saying, I cannot let the things that are out of my control bother me. And the only way now to manifest that and to create it and to figure the emotion that I want, right, is to get into the ice bath. Right. I've got to start being happy in that ice bath. That's it. Yeah. Now I'm going to work that. Okay. Because if that's what I'm going for, then how do I practice that? And now that's how I practice it. And I can tell you definitively, I just started making other decisions. This is all, I think, we're still having, we're not, again,
You're not done.
Love or hate, who was in president before or after, doesn't matter to me. Guess we're not looking any different right now with our response to this thing. We're not. Okay.
Yeah.
But so I just said, look, I get to make other decisions. I'm not going to read about it anymore. I have my thoughts. I think I'm pretty accurate where I am. My family can control this. We can be healthy, right? We can do all those things. I don't have to worry about it anymore, right? The lockdown and all that stuff, I can control what I do for my business, right? I disagreed with what they're doing with schools. I get it. They're trying. I can promise you in 15 years, there's going to be some studies about what it does to you walking around with a mask on your face all day.
Yeah, of course.
How is that good? Right. Yeah. But so we said, the schools are doing the best they can. We get it. We just don't like it. So we're going to disenroll our kids. We're going to do it ourselves until this whole thing settles down. So my point is, those are not the right decisions or the wrong decisions. They are our decisions that we were able to consciously make after I settled down and after I used the cold to figure out who I wanted to be now in this thing. I had to be somebody different than I was being. So again, a long answer to the origins of 365 at 36.5, but it's made all the difference in the world. It simply has.
I think ice baths are an amazing way to hack when you get triggered on something, right?
Yep.
Because I've done that numerous times when something pops up and my emotions or feelings are just out of whack, and I can tell my mind like I'm angry, and I'm like, let's go in an ice bath. And you go in an ice bath and you come out of that and you're in a completely different state of mind.
Different spot.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Well, I mean, look, and I do, before I got on, I had an unusually long morning, and I was a little drained. I was tired, right? I had an hour. All right, do I take a nap? But then I'm going to wake up. I'm like, no, get in the ice bath, rejuvenate, get your mind right. It's the answer every time, like you said. At least for me, right?
Yeah. Was it your second ice bath of the day then to take one? Or what time of the day do you normally take your ice bath?
So I've given myself some latitude on that. Now, the ideal way to do it is first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, do your breathing, then do your cold. Okay. I won't bore everybody with why, right? So maybe some other day we'll get on. I can tell you why. But I've got a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old who we now homeschool. And when they are up, it's on.
Yeah.
So I've got to find hours to get some quiet work. So I'm an early riser. I wake up at 4:30 so I can use that time to get work done, right? I would prefer to start my day with the breathing in the cold shower, but by the time that's over, now the kids are starting to wake up, right? So what I do now is I fit it in. I just get it in.
Anytime in the day, yeah.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but I've got to prioritize
for sure
the work, getting done. And it's fine, right? Yeah. Again, it's not perfect, but sometimes I'm right before bed and I'm like, all right, ice bath time, not a big deal, right? Yeah. And what's the intention going in? Nice and calm, whatever it is. So that's kind of where I am right now with that stuff. Same with exercise. I'd love to be able to just do it all first thing in the morning. It's not fitting.
Doesn't always fit.
Yeah.
So if you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning, what time do you go to bed?
We go to bed early, man. If my head's not hitting the pillow by 8, I'm like, what is going on here? Right. So, the kids are getting older, so we're letting them, we've kind of trained them to say, you can stay up and watch the end of this show, and then we're going to trust you to go to bed. And look, they can't, if they're not doing that, we're going to know because we're going to hear them.
Yeah.
But that's how we make that adjustment. So, early to bed, early to rise.
So you get up at 4:30 and then what do you do since you're not breathing and
so
ice bathing is first?
I use, look, we have 3 dogs, right? So I'm in charge of taking care of the dogs. So we get them up and running. And then I start the list of things to do, right? I've typically got my days mapped out pretty well as far as client calls, and then obviously the other stuff we need to do to try to build the business. So that's where it is. I time blocked, just a nice little strategy. For some reason I stopped, and I don't know why. I think I just forgot to do it. But I went through my calendar for a couple of weeks and said, okay, here's 1 hour for breathing and ice. And I just put it on the calendar. That was great.
Yeah.
And then for some reason I stopped. I was like, why did I stop doing that? So I'm going to get back to doing that, just time blocking it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And same with the workout, just trying to get that in. But so those kind of come second, even though, there's still a 1A or 1 and 1A. But getting the kids, making sure my wife has what she needs to school the kids, giving her time to do her work for the business, and me jumping in, and both of us getting our exercise in. It is what it is.
How many hours a day do you usually work?
I would say it varies. And I try not to overdo it, but I'd be surprised if I work less than 10 hours,
It's fair. Yeah.
Look, if this is an entrepreneur podcast, you
10 hours.
The challenge is to not work 20 hours. That's the challenge. Like sometimes I have to put it down and say, stop.
Yeah.
That's it for the day. You've got to get on with the other things.
10 hours with 3 kids and 3 dogs and a wife, man. You're getting a lot of time for work. Like that's
getting
really
a lot of
good.
work in. Yeah, for sure. And you can only do that with support. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then also stopping it.
Yeah.
Right. Look, there's some days where I'm at 8 hours and I'm like, I've worked 8 straight hours. I'm done.
Yeah.
For the day. That's enough. That's plenty. Go play with the kids. Go read a book. Go do your other stuff now. It's a challenge.
Do you do any intermittent fasting, special diet type of thing?
I do. So I try to fast at least 1 day a week. Just a full 24-hour fast, water fast.
Nice.
Me and my wife, I about quarterly do a 5-day fast.
Nice. Yeah.
And those are invaluable. And again, sometimes better than the other, right? I stopped counting the hours for intermittent fasting because it was consuming me.
Yeah.
Like, when do I get to eat? What hour am I on? So
I know how you feel about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I stopped, and I have a general kind of feeling about how long I've been not eating. But if it's consuming me, I just go eat. Yeah. So not so much on that, but I do keep an eye on it. I try to go for a while, but like I said, it's just a shortcoming. I had the app, right? And, counting down for the intermittent fast. I'd be staring at the app.
You're like 28 minutes left.
Right? What can I do? Does it still count?
Yeah. I know how you feel, man. Like I've done it. I did it for a couple of years. And then finally this past year in 2020, I was just like, man, I miss my morning smoothies too much, and when I got hungry, it was like pushing through that extra hour of just waiting till lunch to have the first meal. So I was like, I still have 2 meals a day and a smoothie, but sometimes I hit the intermittent times, sometimes I don't. So.
Yeah. So what I found was, again, the day fast, once a week or as best I can. Look, I'm not perfect, but that's what I try to do. Yeah. It helps, because it kind of, just like anything else, I'll try to do it early in the week. And then I find the next couple of days, I'm pretty good. Like, the next day I'm just eating 1 meal, and that's cool. And then the next day 2. And then as I get closer to the weekend, and Saturday is my cheat day, I really let it rip on Saturday. It's the challenge, but that's kind of what I try to do. Fair enough, man. Fair enough.
I think, man, we're going to wrap it up there. That was an amazing chat. I really enjoyed it. If, Errol, if the listeners want to learn more about you, reach out, learn more about you, where's the best place they can do that at?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, Leader 193 is my company, and my website is Leader 193. We've got a pretty solid website about what we offer, what we do, when we're doing it. So you can go as far as Wim Hof and our seminars that we put on. We've started putting on about a monthly free webinar. We've got the next one coming up tomorrow. This, this isn't going to be out tomorrow, but I think we've got another one coming up in March. And we're starting a mastermind of our own. So you can find that stuff there. So leader193.com. For fun on Instagram, I'm at Leader193, and Facebook at Leader193. And those are kind of my main social platforms as well.
Yeah. When when knowing that I was going to interview, I was doing some research, and I was like, what is Leader 193? Wonder what 193 stands for, but I found out it's the number of your buds team for SEALs training, right?
That's right. That was my Hell Week class, 193. So just
Yeah.
paying homage to something that, time in my life that meant a lot to me.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Errol, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I enjoyed the chat a lot. Thank you for sharing all your tips and tricks and wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you having me on, Chris, and I hope your listeners got something out of it. Thanks.
I'm sure they will. Listeners, thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.